Our point is to talk here about the secret life of pangolin is not about how they behave. It's about the serious concern of illegal wildlife trade. So we have our two brilliant speaker, good-looking speaker here, Ofir from Africa and Jose from India. So they are well known for their illegal wildlife trade control work. So I would like to introduce Ofir first. Ofir is an activist, wildlife conservationist from Israel, working in a African region. He is the founding director of Laga and Eagle Network. And if you search Ofir, you'll find Ofir picture with a good-looking chimp and Ofir both look good there. So, and he's also a FFN 2008 awardee. Is really doing his team is really doing a good work in Africa to counter illegal wildlife trade. And thanks Ofir to being here. And we have Jose Louies here. Many people know him as a snake. He runs an Indian snake also. He has a he has a career of 15 more than 15 years in illegal wildlife trade. He busted the whole tiger trade and ivory trade from the Kerala, and he's a chief of enforcement and joint director of WTI. So, firstly, I would like to request Ofi if you had some kind of presentation to show us. Basically, we want to know what's the scenario happening in Africa in terms of pangolin trade, and whatever information you can provide as a pangolin, because it's everything for some people. Everything is secret about pangolins. Over to you, Ophir.
Yeah, let me try to thank you so much, and thank you for the kind words. And let me try to share. Can I share the screen? I'm authorized to share the screen.
Yeah, you can, I guess.
Let me see. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's visible. Can you put it in a presentation mode?
Yep.
Yeah,
we're good.
Okay. Yeah, we are good.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And yeah, I want to try to give the perspective on the illegal trade in pangolins from an African perspective. I think that can get you mainly a word of warning, because it was surprising to us of how it was booming and very fast, how from something small it became something huge. So I want to try to give that perspective and try to explain a bit more. So my presentation is a bit of if it's a secret life of pangolins. So mine is a secret life of pangolins traffickers in Africa, very secret. So in Africa we have 4 different species of pangolins. And I think that what is important to explain is how it was completely surprising for us. Like you said, like the surprise about what is a pangolin even, you know? So yeah. With us up to 2008, we could see pangolin scales thrown in villages. So they had 0 value. The scales had 0 value up to that point. Pangolins were traded for bushmeat. It wasn't very particular, so it was the same like a porcupine, other animals, which is obviously risking the species, but it wasn't something booming. It wasn't something exceptional. And the scales had 0 value completely. And in 2008, we saw some suspicious activity, intercepted some suspicious activity of a motorbike rider, a motorbike taxi, moving around the capital in some of the posh quarters in the capital in Cameroon, moving from house to house, Chinese households. And so we didn't understand what is going on. It doesn't look like ivory. It's like small packets. We didn't get it. Like, what the hell is going on? Something is going on. And we tracked it. And in the end, we didn't know what to do. It's just like, we stopped it. We said, okay, what is that? And we opened it up and we were shocked that these are pangolin scales. Because again, they had 0 value. We didn't really see and know anything about that in that regard. What is really interesting is that from that first time we saw the first time documented in Africa that there is some kind of trade in pangolin scales, within a year, we were doing so many different arrests of the booming level of illegal trade in pangolin scales. In that year, within a year, we had arrest of, for example, Chinese nationals in the airport, coming from sea from Nigeria, in a land border, in the north. It was booming. Asians were taking pangolin scales with suitcases. That's how we arrested them. We started looking at different packings that they were doing it in, like packing it like a product, with some kind of like a pack and everything, like it is a real product of food stuff. So, and ever since then, it was completely booming. We got more arrests of tons of pangolin scales, tons, very organized, very centralized, involving a large networks across countries, and obviously intercontinental. So that is the situation. Let me explain that every time that we have this kind of arrest, what you see here is hundreds of pangolins slaughtered to produce those scales, because they're dried before they are traded. So basically, the price in the bottom for a kg of pangolin scales, it can be around $50 per kg. So imagine when we have quantities like this, and this is like a normal arrest operation for us for pangolin scales. This is not a big one, and something like this, we're talking about thousands of pangolins that are getting slaughtered for that. It's a network that produces that. So if I talked about a bit of organized crime kind of like work, very much structured, let me show you how criminal it is. This was a time in which we got information about through investigations about a Chinese company that where the managers are collecting pangolin scales in big scale, in like large quantities, and they're trading and exporting. So we knew there was something, and we went in when we raided the place, because we couldn't really continue the investigation within the compound. They were very much secretive about it. We came and we raided the place, and the idea was to raid the place, seize the pangolin scales, arrest those guys, and take them out. We came in and we found this, what you see here, that gray thing behind, that is like a container. So we came in, we tried to open that container. We couldn't. It was completely welded. An improvised container, metal plates, welded completely. There's no way to open it. We were stuck. Imagine we had police officers, wildlife officers, all there, the entire force, and we were just waiting to try to find somebody with a disc saw that can cut through that metal so that we can actually see that there is indeed pangolin scales inside. Okay, and once we opened that, and their idea was to put this thing that is well welded and couldn't open inside a shipping container, and dub this container as machinery equipment or parts, big machine parts, to be exported. So that even if this is inspected, no one can even open it up. That's the kind of level we're talking about. And this is 5.2 tons of pangolin scales. We're talking about tens of thousands of killed pangolins that you see here when we started loading some of these boxes on a truck. This is not even everything, because it didn't even fit the photo. And these are the two Chinese that were there. So a little bit of explaining how much it is a criminal connected to organized crime, the scale for which it is performing, and you can already imagine which kind of network you need in order to get 5.2 tons of pangolin scales produced from tens of thousands of killed pangolins. Again, from something very small to something huge. I want to explain another interesting aspect in pangolin scales illegal trade that we observed. You see, in Africa, the illegal trade in ivory, maybe skins, leopard skins, lion skins, is kind of its own thing. And the illegal trade in live animals, like African grey parrots, for example, it's a very lucrative kind of species, but also some monkeys, maybe chimps and gorillas, babies. This live animals trade is somehow of a different stream. It's a different speciality. So in Africa, you would have the criminal families that deal with that are the traffickers or organized crime dealing with live animals, and then it's a bit separate from those who are dealing with ivory and some of the other things in that regard. And it requires different kind of speciality, and it's a different market also for the other side mostly. So I'm generalizing, but that's generally the thing. So now from the very beginning, when we looked at the pangolin scales illegal trade booming, we realized that, wait a second, there's something here, because in the marketplace, those traffickers on the other side, the Asian syndicates that are getting the pangolin scales are more associated from the ivory and skins and different things like this than they are in live animals. So naturally, they should be associated with those that already have the connections and the kind of organization with this kind of illegal trade. On the other hand, in order to get 5.2 tons, for example, of pangolin scales, you need to have a very good collection system. You need to work in different places in villages, which is what the live animals traffickers do. In order to get a shipment of African grey parrots that you see here, you need to have a network and put advances of money in different parts of the country, all over, in different villages, and say, this is the money, go and start collecting. Parrots, go and put glue on trees, start collecting them. I will come back in 2 weeks and start collecting what you have, and I'll do another round. That is the idea. So in that sense, here we got something very interesting. The live animal traders are those who have the advantage in sourcing and getting these pangolin scales in quantities that ivory traffickers do not have at all. They don't have this infrastructure. But the market or the other traffickers, all the Asian side is more associated to the ivory. So here we saw something very dangerous that we alerted for, and then we saw it later on happening, where basically the pangolin scale specifically kind of connected two parts of the illegal trade that were not connected and now joining forces. So now we have more traffickers that are able to do more. We have live animal traffickers who do the pangolin scales and can do also ivory. We started looking at that exact thing, doing also ivory trade, doing also leopard skins, lion skins, which was not before. So that's a very interesting aspect of the illegal trade in pangolins, and how it is having a very, very harmful kind of effect, combining two parts of the trade that before were not really helping each other or communicating with each other at any point of time. I want to end by talking about corruption, explaining more about the corruption in this illegal trade. I mentioned organized crime. I mentioned criminal syndicates, large scale. So of course that is enabled only by corruption. That's how these empires continue to grow and not stopped even when they are visible. So the example, I have many examples on corruption in pangolin scales, but I'll give you one of them that is interesting. And this is an example of the first ever case, court case of pangolin trafficking in Uganda. And so Uganda never had this kind of cases. It was the first time it comes to court. The prosecutor, his name is Vincent. Vincent was the only wildlife prosecutor in Uganda, in the country, and he presented the case to the judge. And he, the sack of pangolin scales was brought to court, and Vincent was trying his best to convince the judge that this is not nothing, that is a very lucrative business. This fetches a lot of money. And he was trying to claim that the value of these pangolin scales is a huge value, so that the fine and the penalties that should be given should be also appropriate. As for that, it's not a simple crime that we're talking about. And Vincent was a very good wildlife prosecutor, maybe too good, because he convinced the judge so much, maybe too much, and I'll explain. So the trial finished, and actually the trafficker was condemned to jail. So he went to jail, which we're pleased about. And then, as I said, the pangolin scales are in the court's possession or in the court's stockroom during the trial. But when the trial is finished, all the evidence now has to go back to the ministry in charge of wildlife, to their stockroom, or be destroyed many times. In any case, that's how it goes with any kind of contraband that is on trial. And Vincent was waiting for the big sack of pangolin scales to come back, and he didn't. And so he went to the judge and says, "Judge, the trial is finished. I'm waiting for the pangolin scales for the procedure to follow. We need to take it to the stockroom of the wildlife authorities." And the judge was saying, "Okay, come later, come in 1 week." Vincent comes in 1 week. The judge says, "Well, but let me give me some time, and I'll do it." And so it goes, and 1 month passes, 2 months passes, and the judge is reluctant to give back the pangolin scales. And so Vincent goes to the Ministry of Justice and says, and writes a letter and says, "These pangolin scales were supposed to be arriving to the ministry 2 months ago, and until now, reluctantly, they are not arriving to the ministry. We need to follow the procedure. The judge doesn't follow the procedure." The judge calls back Vincent, says, "Vincent, why did you do that? Come to my office." And he was pleading and saying, "Why did you have to embarrass me with that? I'll get you the sack with the pangolin scales. Come back next week." Next week comes, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. In the end, Vincent is getting the sack with the pangolin scales. Went to the judge. Judge says, "Look, sign here, take the sack, and take it with you." And Vincent signs, very happy, put the sack in his car, drives back to the ministry stockroom, opens the sack, and what he finds, instead of the sack full of pangolin scales, is a sack full of small plastics. cut plastic bottles cut into the shape of a pangolin scales filled the entire sack. He didn't look at all like pangolin scales, but I guess this was the idea, to try to fake pangolin scale. So the story behind it is that Vincent was convincing the judge so much of that this is really valuable, that the judge was thinking, "Oh, okay, I can make good money. Vincent has a point." And so he stole the pangolin scales, traded them, and then was stuck. And once he was embarrassed that there was no pangolin scales, he probably said to some people in the quarters, some boys in the quarters, "You know what, why don't you start cutting plastics that could look like pangolin scales? I'll pay you something small. Do that." And that was the case, and there was a procedure against this magistrate. But this is just an example to explain to you how corruption is so pervasive on the illegal pangolin scales, and how it must be combated. And we have many more examples like this when we get real big people behind the pangolin scales and the attempts to try to release them, and so on. I was asked to say something about what we do in Africa to try to combat this kind of thing. So just in a few words, I would talk about the Eagle approach. We are an NGO collaborating with governments. We fight corruption to get the law applied. That's a huge thing as an obstacle for wildlife law enforcement. We follow the entire process across different stages, from undercover investigations to coordinating arrest operations in the field with the police, to legal prosecution, private prosecutions, and legal follow-up of a case, up to the prisons, and even with the media publicizing positive results of this. We have a measurable target for our work, which is the number of imprisoned traffickers, and we had by now more than 3,000 major traffickers that we got jailed to this point. So let me end here, and leave more time for debates and other presentations. But I just want to say that I think my main message here from Africa is to say, pay attention to things that look small. The small is always more visible, okay? Just like for us, you know, all of a sudden, once we realized that it started, it was booming. And every year we got something bigger and more important and more, and every time we're surprised. So always think about not what you have as a problem right now, but what will you have as a problem in next year, 2 years, 3 years. And again, this is a booming business. The economy of it talks. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot of it. That was a really good insight of what's happening in Africa. I have a few questions. You showed there's a pangolin trafficking happening along with the live pet trade, elephant tusk, and other wildlife article. Have you ever encountered pangolin being trafficked along with the arms or human trafficking there in Africa?
Yes, of course. Okay, I can give a small example if you would like me to do that.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so this example is of a Vietnamese syndicate.
Yeah.
Okay, that was estimated to have disseminated something like 36,000 elephants.
Oh.
That is around 10% of the elephants we have right now in Africa, if we're lucky. Just one crime syndicate, imagine. Okay, so this syndicate we were able to see it and trace it because it was visible. They used a very specific method. They were trafficking the ivory in containers inside crates of wood, like it is a wood planch, a wood part, and they were putting wax inside. Okay, so it was wax and it was hardened. And that was their method. So it was traced to so many different media articles you could see of seizures of tons and tons of ivory in different parts of the world, obviously with no arrests, unfortunately for all of us. Okay, so no follow-up whatsoever, a seizure, everybody's happy, no trafficker is arrested. That's the majority of what we see in the news, if we look very well behind it. So this syndicate is a Vietnamese syndicate. It's a criminal syndicate. It's not a wildlife syndicate. It's a criminal syndicate that does different things known in Vietnam. Wildlife is just one part of what they do. We have done the arrest of the Africa part of this syndicate, the representative in Africa, and we managed to also make arrest of a fellow syndicate that was collaborating with them, a Chinese syndicate together. Okay. So very interesting case, very criminal. When I was doing a house search in the Chinese syndicate connected to that, to the Vietnamese syndicate together, when we were doing this arrest, in the house search, we found around a ton of pangolin scales packed in boxes, really like products. Okay, and some ivory as well. So that was pangolin scale. In the same one, okay, we have found papers. We do the research. All of a sudden, we look at all the paperwork, all the papers. We look at a pages in which you have a picture of a girl and information about the girl, a very nice looking girl each time. And also information about female genital mutilation, okay? Female genital mutilation, which is common in the country where we were doing the arrest, Ivory Coast. And so we were immediately trying to confront, there were like 15 of them. And we're immediately trying to confront into the interrogation. I was coming to the Chinese trafficker, organized crime, not a wildlife trafficker only, but a criminal. And I was bringing it up and saying, what is this? What is this? And he said, no, I just wanted to get them a job. That's all. We managed to contact some of these victims. Some of them were only left towards China. Trafficked. This is human trafficking for prostitution. Those that we were recovering, those that we were able to contact were those that were feeling that something is wrong and they left. And the story was the same. They're all beautiful girls. They said we came into his house. He have promised us to immigrate to China. Then he asked us to undress and dance for him. He said that we'll be dancers and we may do other things as well. You got the point. This is an example of a crime that is associated with pangolin scales right now as an example. The same case, we had illegal arms trade and illegal trade of arms with warlords in Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast has wanted criminals from a war that happened there. We had a high-level corruption associated, money laundering corruption, because we found calculations of 1.2 million euros, 1.5 million euros just on the desk, on the table, as we done these arrests. And there was association of drugs. So in a Viber conversation between the syndicate, the Vietnamese syndicate, and their boss, there were discussions in Viber about how to increase the illegal trade in drugs from Ivory Coast to the Czech Republic, where they have a station, where they have a good stronghold for that syndicate there, Vietnamese syndicate. And we've seen all these kind of things, of discussions. So there's more to it, but I'm trying to not dominate the conversation here. It's just to say that here is just one example of one case, and look how many associated crimes were from that with it, you know.
Yeah, and I feel that part of Secret Life of Pangolins are really in danger, and you're getting tons of pangolin scales. And I just wanted to ask one question to you. Have you ever seen a pangolin in wild?
Yeah.
That's
the
brilliant.
First, so the first time, yes, I've seen it one time in Uganda, but I can tell you when was, you talked about what was your first time to see a pangolin.
Yeah.
For me, it was the same thing. We were doing a raid. At that time, pangolin scale, it was when it was still bushmeat, so it was prior to 2008, as I explained. It was even not actually forbidden for that species, for example. It wasn't something that was called a Class B animal. It wasn't something that gives you imprisonment, let's put it this way. And we've done a raid. We've arrested people with chimp meat, gorilla meat, and there was also a live pangolin. They put him in a tire. It's a tree pangolin. They put him in a tire so it can't move. It just rolls around. Oh. And I'm doing this, and all of a sudden I see this pangolin for the first time, and we seize it, we take it. And I took it, and there was nothing, nobody was even considering it as something. So after the arrest, I still took it with me, and I went myself to the forest without any procedure that was needed, just myself. We took him, that kind of ball, and put him in the forest, and slowly he went up and started climbing the tree, and it was just a wonderful experience of releasing a pangolin. So that's my experience.
Yeah, that's great. And I would like to ask you one final question here from my side. What's the scenario about cyber illegal wildlife trade of pangolins in Africa there?
Okay, that's a good question. It exists more and more. It exists more and more. We have more and more of it. The net connects with markets that were prior not opened, and it can get to the beginners also very much. Like, I'll give you an example of a beginner, so that, because we all understand what is the general phenomena. Like, we understand how it works if you have quantities and you are like professional about it. But let me explain how it helps the beginners to become big fast, because that would be for me more significant in that sense, as opposed to an additional boost. Okay. We had somebody who got live pangolins and started advertising it in Benin. And we didn't really believe it, because they're like, how does it even work? Somebody two pangolins, and you're trying to advertise it. What will it give you, and how will it work? And we're really skeptical. We said, no, it's probably a scam or something like that. And we ended up arresting this guy with 2 live pangolins. And he was not a huge trafficker. He was a beginner, and he was explaining of that he understood the potential in it. He understood there is a illegal trade, others are doing. He's not big, but he says, but I was having this initiative to do it. And if we would not stop him, he would have grown far bigger, far faster. So I think that kind of a startup kind of thing is where that will be a real harmful thing. And all the others is a boost, is an additional thing where they already have a lot of, even without it, they will continue, and they will, some of them do that. So it helps us because they're more visible, and that can work, you know.
Yeah, that thanks a lot of it's like giving insight of what's happening in Africa, and that's huge because we are encountering more scissors from Africa, Nigeria. So it's like a tons of pangolin scales. And in my knowledge, if I can, you can correct me. From one giant African pangolin, you'll get around 1.5 kg pangolin scale maximum, or 2 kgs.
From a small one, yeah, from a small,
Yeah,
not from
from a
not
small
from
one.
a normal giant one, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So if
But
you're
basically, yeah, we're talking about every sack that you've seen there is hundreds, and some of the things that you have seen is thousands, and the container I showed is tens of thousands. So yeah, you know,
it's really
the slaughter
unbelievable.
is amazing. Yeah,
It's unbelievable because in the wild you can't see a one single pangolin, and a Caesar
exactly.
you're finding this much. And we got a really interesting question. Two pangolins are trafficked in India too. So I would like Joseph now to take up the floor and talk about the pangolin trafficking in India. And also we have received question like what Indian authorities are doing to encounter pangolin trade. So over to you, Joseph.
Thank you very much, Monish. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Ofir, let me thank you first for that fantastic presentation and sharing your experience from Africa. India also we have similar situations, and let me start with our experience of encountering pangolin trade in, because way back in say in 2008-9, when we did some studies with tribal hunting communities, I remember seeing pangolin as a source of meat for many of them. They were not looking at pangolin as a source for scales. So nobody was using scales for any purpose in India. So way back in 2008-9, that was the first encounter with pangolin trade. So interestingly, I would like to share some of our field experience and how pangolins were hunted by these people, the hunting communities, and the methods of hunting pangolins which they implemented, and the reasons for hunting pangolins. As all of you know, pangolins are elusive nocturnal animals, and we have two species, which is the Chinese pangolin and the Indian pangolin in India. Most part of the mainland you will find the Indian pangolin, and towards the northeast you will find the Chinese pangolin. And I think there are some areas in West Bengal, Sikkim area, where there is an overlapping of this population. When we saw the pangolin hunting in the beginning, I have seen it in southern India with certain communities, and northern India with certain communities who used to hunt pangolins. Those days it was for subsistence, so they were hunting pangolins for food, and primarily the hunting dogs which they used was used for sniffing out pangolins and then identify burrows where pangolins were hiding. And the most common method was either smoke them or pour some water, or even in some cases they used to dig pangolin. And anybody who was hunting pangolins those days, it was purely for meat purpose. So there was no scale trade at that point of time. Of course, scale was always, I mean, pangolins were skinned and some scales were kept, because a few places we came across with the traditional medicinal usage for pangolin scales, very limited. There was not widespread or anything. Certain diseases, they say pangolin scales were used, but not something which was threatening the population. The subsistence hunting business. Or so pangolins were not one of the top demand or top sought animal. If you find a pangolin, if they get a pangolin, that is fine. It is eaten, and the scale is, as Ofir said, the scale was thrown around. Kids used to play with the pangolin scales. That was the first thing I noticed, that many kids used to play with the pangolin scales, like, as common as how you use coconut shells for playing. So I also could not recognize pangolin scales when I saw it for the first time. I was thinking that what is it? It looks like a dried up, large, huge fish scale. What fish it could be? Kind of question. So from that, in 2008-9, the scenario started changing slowly in India. Maybe by 2012, we started hearing about pangolin trade, organized pangolin trade in India. If my memory is not mistaken, that is when we started hearing about that there is demand in pangolin scales. First, it came from the intelligence community or ground level informer community, that they started talking about people coming and asking for pangolin scales. And these were people who were involved in other hunting activities, bushmeat trade, or animal pelt dealing and all. So they said that there are people coming and now asking for this scale. So I'm actually taking all of you through the history of pangolin scales. I don't have a presentation. I thought I'll let me talk about it. So 2012, 2014, I think then it became established in India. We started talking about large scale pangolin trade in India. And if you look at the national databases, the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, who's the central agency who is looking into wildlife crime, if you look at their database, large number of seizures of smaller amount of pangolins. Unlike Africa, the huge difference is the quantity of material which we are getting. It is small. Most seizures you find few kilograms, and the largest were running into few hundred kilograms, not into tons. Northeastern part of India, especially the border districts and border towns, became a hotspot for pangolin scale smuggling. And if you look at most of the larger seizures from one particular village, one particular border town in India, Moray, where Assam Rifle caught large number of pangolin scales as part of their uh, regular checking. So please, for those who are not very familiar with these terminologies, as Assam Rifles or Moray, let me tell you, Moray is a small border town between at the Indo-Myanmar border, which has got open trade relations between India and Myanmar, and unfortunately, an infamous hub for a lot of trafficking of various things. You call anything, you arms, drugs, wildlife products, maybe at times human trafficking, everything happens there. So the enforcement agency, the paramilitary force, which is stationed at the border, is the Assam Rifles, Indian Enforcement Agency. So they do regular checkings of people who cross the border, and they started finding pangolin scales in consignments, and that is probably the first big alarms went off across the country, that people started looking at pangolin scales more seriously. So that was actually um, an example or an evidence that pangolin scales are being trafficked towards the northeastern part of the region, and it is going out of India to Myanmar. And definitely we know that the destination is towards China or Vietnam, because that was the route speaking. And in 2014, 15, 16, in India, across the country, there were multiple seizures, multiple networks were busted by state forest departments, Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, state police, various agencies were coming across with pangolin scales. The trade became very much distributed country. So that was we were looking at. So from an unknown trade, unknown commodity in 2008, by 2014, 15, the trade in pangolin scales was rampant across the country. I mean, most part of the distribution region, you were finding cases, especially if you look at southern states. In Tamil Nadu, there were certain cities became hubs of trade by with established gangs operating, and everything was happening. I mean, you were seizing smaller amount of pangolin scales from hunters, middlemen, small scale traders, and the number of seizures were high across the country. So what that was indicating is that the trade is is widespread across the country. Let me tell you about a couple of incidents which we came across, because in one certain central Indian town, we came across with a network where sub agents, very much like what Ofir told about the people who are scouting Chinese households. So here it was like a multi-level marketing system, very well networked, because I happened to hear some of the conversations over phones with an enforcement agency. So it was like, the big boss was having a conference, teleconference happening with his subordinates, asking them to go each village. I mean, each person was assigned 3 or 4 villages. So he has to visit every week. He has to ensure that he will collect a minimum X amount of quantity from each village, which village he has to focus, which village he need not to focus, which market to look, which day the market is happening. So you have to go to that particular village on the market day and talk to people, ensure that next week come from the tribal hamlets or remote villages to a larger village or a small city where they buy and sell goods. Use those village markets as their hubs of trade. So the trade was getting very organized in 2015-16. So the 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 widespread incidents across the country and established networks in India was very much active by 2015-16. But at the same time, the enforcement agencies, especially I would like to mention the MP Forest Department, Madhya Pradesh Forest Department's still, which was headed by an efficient officer, started unearthing pangolins trade network, and our team had a good opportunity to work with him in the field. So that is when we started looking at a little more into the trade, where we interacted with the suspects who were into the trade. And then by then it was clear that the demand is there, the supply is there is fixed the price mark, price patterns. Like, we were looking at standard pricing, like, price trend. It is like stock market. One particular week, the demand is high and the price goes up, and the demand comes down, the price comes down a little. So all those patterns were very much visible. And arrest of certain Central Indian operatives actually showed connections to Northeast, established the connections to Northeast, and that was one of the major bust of pangolin trade network in India in 2015-16 itself. The trade was busted, and the network started busted, and structured investigation. I will say that one thing which went right in India from this structured investigation. Structured investigation means they were not just looking at one player, they were looking at networks, they were looking at middlemen, they were looking at transporters, they were looking at financiers. So they managed to, bring down these people. But, like any other trade, this was always an amoebic uh, nature of growing, that you hit it in one place, it will grow in another place. A couple of people who are not in the business, I mean, who are in business, will regroup and form another gang and set up another network and then do the trade again, because most of them were connected over mobile phones and WhatsApp groups and other things. So they were able to regroup. So the ability of this network to regroup was probably one of the challenges which enforcement agencies were facing. And also the greater dependency on mobile based trade, mobile based communication ensured that some of these people, like, they started using WhatsApp calls and other encrypted platforms, so that the suspects became very much aware about the mobile based or mobile based investigations, and all. They started avoiding it at the same time. So this period, 2014 to 18, I will say that both side things were active. The traders were active, the enforcement agencies were active. They were doing some trade, enforcement agencies were arresting people. So the pangolin trade in India peaked probably in 2000, 15, 16, 17, and then there was a reduction in the trade because of various reasons. So when I look at that, I think that was largely the sustainability of the trade from India was not that great. the price competition, because Indian market, the price was very high, and I don't think it was very much economical for them to buy things in the Indian market, because there were multiple levels of middlemen involved. So by the time it reaches the border, the price was very high. And unfortunately, probably they were not able to compete with the pricing from African countries, where containers full of pangolin scales were coming at a cheaper into the market, and the Indian traders were finding it is difficult to push their product into the market. I'm sorry talking about things like in pure commercial terms, because when we look at illegal wildlife trade, we have to really look in commercials of it. But that created and that opened another market of live pangolin trade in India, which is probably was again a big challenge, because people started selling live pangolins not for meat, but with exorbitant price tags, like for $1 million price, like live pangolins. So this was a trade which was probably caused more damage to pangolins than the scale trade, because everybody was hunting pangolins in their habitats. Because unfortunately, whenever a live pangolin was caught, people talked about high price values, like price was running into, for my Indian participants, price was running into lakhs of rupees. Like one pangolin will cost you 10 lakhs, one pangolin will cost you 15 lakhs. And without very facts, the press started quoting these prices and publishing it in the regional languages, in newspapers, websites, and all. So that actually created a market which was not existing, which is not a real market. But unfortunately, what we were looking at, that everywhere people were capturing pangolins, keeping them in plastic drums, and conducting various interesting tests on them. Like we could get photographs or videos of people putting electric testers on pangolin and saying that this pangolin with voltage. But Ofir, don't laugh. It is India. We got various ways of selling things. So that actually killed probably large number of pangolins, because people who caught pangolins had no idea about the animal. They kept them in drums. They tried to keep them alive. They tried to feed it with fruits. They tried to feed it with meat. They tried to feed it with, but they could not understand that this will not eat any of those things. And the stress and captivity was too much for the animals. A large number of animals which got killed in this captive process is because of this baseless trade, because there was no end market, there was no such high value for this animal, but everybody thought that this is something which they can make millions out of it. So that trade actually became rampant. And as a result of this trade, as a result of this live animal trade, again you start getting byproducts of scales, because their animals died and the scales were lying with them, so they were trying to sell the scales. So that was another resurgence of the pangolin scale trade. And people kept the scale because they thought that it is like stock market, the price has come down, there will be one fine day the price go up. So um, I could say that there are a number of people who are holding 1 kilograms or 2 kilograms or a few kilograms of pangolin scales in their attic and in their hiding places, thinking that one fine day the price will come back. So today, if you look at in 2022-23, the price, the pangolin scale trade, organized pangolin scale trade, it is not as high as that it was earlier in the market. But I'm not telling that the trade is gone down completely. Probably the price tags in India is higher than what the price tags which they are getting in Amazon, in Africa. So there may be a less demand, and the number of instances where people are putting pangolins, live pangolins for trade in social media or in secret digital platforms has come down. Various efforts and commendable efforts by the enforcement agencies of India. I would like to congratulate them for the enforcement of efforts, because whether it is a range officer or even a forest guard at a beat level who stopped the ground level trade, or the forest departments who looked at organized trade at their state, and the National Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, which looked at the trade at the national level and international level in an effective manner, and also the Indian enforcement agency, the Financial Enforcement Agency, ED, Enforcement Directorate or DRI. They also have conducted operations, or they also shared intelligence about the people who are dealing in pangolin scales to enforcement agencies. So I think it was a multi-level crackdown on trade, which to control and contain the trade. I will never ever say that the trade is disappeared, but I would love to say that the trade seems to be. I underline, emphasize that trade seems to be in control at this point of time. But the problem is that the challenge is that there are still people out there who believe that pangolins do carry a very high price tag, and they can fetch them huge amount of money. They will still continue the trade, and the trade dynamics in the national international market, probably the supply chain, supply demand supply mechanisms in the international market may affect again our population, and the pressure will be always there. The threat is not over. Threat is as elusive and as unknown as the pangolin is always hovering around, and it will remain like that. We have to be very careful. Finally, I would like add one more, that the biggest challenge is the live animals which we get in this trade, because many people don't understand what to do with these animals. Because if you get a small animal, it will cry, it will show distress, it will communicate with you, saying that comfortable. If you get a tiger cub or a leopard cub, it will make plenty of noise, it will run around, but a pangolin will just coil up and stay silent. People will think that, okay, this is happy, the animal is comfortable. But what they are not understanding, that this is a mammal which needs water, which needs shelter, and not an animal which is elusive, and it is it's an animal of silence, of forest. But you put it in a cage in the middle of a office room, and people take photographs, people want to see the head of the animal, they want to figure out how it looks, and they try to feed it. They, because of the procedures and all, you will keep it for a couple of days and they die in captivity. So my request to people who are attending here, if in any chance where you come across with a pangolin in captivity, please get in touch with a veterinary doctor, and please release the animal at the earliest to wild, if you can't do anything else, because that's very much needed for this individual animals. Because we came across with many incidents where well, yes, I'm not telling any of these people were people who wanted to get the pangolin killed, but people who wanted to save the animal don't have an idea about the animal. Please understand, this animal is not a carnivore. It will eat ants and insects, so you cannot feed it easily. It needs silence. It needs the cover of darkness to be, to be happy. So release it in an area where it can survive. And there are protocols, there are guidelines which are available. One of our zoos in India, the Nandankanan Zoo, has come out with some guidelines. There are international guidelines for pangolin rehabilitation and relocation. Please follow these things to ensure that this animal is released back in the wild at the earliest. At least I tell times when we come across with people who caught pangolins, live animals, I tell them that please keep it in a dark room with some sand or some cover, and also place some water with some glucose as the first thing, because we don't know for how many days this animal was actually in captivity of the because they don't know how to look after it. So de-stress the animal and get a veterinary doctor to examine the animal and release the wild. That's to people who attend this, that this is an animal which is very elusive, very much we don't much of them. There is not about them. There is not much known about their life. It is still elusive. It is still secret. Even after this webinar, pangolins will globally remain as elusive and threatened. And that's it. And any questions would be very happy to answer as much as I know about us. And let me confess that I know as much as you know. We know very little about pangolins.
Thanks a lot, Joseph.
Thank you.
You said the correct thing, because there's very less study happened in India on pangolins, like in Chinese and Indian pangolin. We were not aware. There's recent researchers came up with a new species, and they are saying that it's maybe from the Manis genera, from the Southeastern Asian areas. So what's your perception about the new mystery species they found? Unfortunately, not in wild, but through the DNA forensic in the wildlife trade. What's your opinion on that?
Manish, if the question is directed towards me, I heard about this and not very sure about the study, and let the scientific community study it and come out with conclusive answers. Until then, we will wait. Until then, we will consider that there is a Chinese pangolin and there is an Indian pangolin. But from a trade perspective, I would like to say that it doesn't make much of a difference to the pangolin at this point of time, whether it is a Chinese pangolin or an Indian pangolin. If it is hunted, if it is killed for the skin, sorry, for the scale or for meat purpose, it is bad for the pangolin. So let
Yeah,
us
correctly.
let us stop there and
Yeah, that's my
yeah.
point. That there's we
Let me
still,
add. Let me add.
yeah.
Let me add. It is at this point of time the need is to counter the population decline due to the illegal hunting than finding whether it is a new subspecies or not. So let us focus on that. I mean, scientists can do their studies, but let us have the pangolins left for studying their DNA and the genetic structure to whether it is a new subspecies or not. I mean, I'm very clear from my point of view. Can we take some questions from uh, the
Uh,
crowd?
yes. There's one question is interesting, which is like I would like to ask Ofir also. What's a punishment under the laws in India and Africa on pangolin traffickers? If anyone is getting convicted, what's the higher amount of punishment they are getting in Africa? Ofir says.
Okay, so it depends on the country. It moves between, Cameroon will be 3 years imprisonment, Congo will be 5 years imprisonment. There's a lot in between. Yeah, that's usually the thing. But the point is that if we don't get imprisonment for pangolin traffickers, we're disappointed. We appeal. If we don't have real active imprisonment, we regard this as a failure, and the majority of which are imprisonment.
Yeah, and what's the scenario in India? So, what's the highest level of punishment for the pangolin traffickers?
Is the question to me, Manish?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, pangolin is a Schedule 1 animal in India, and as per the new Wildlife Protection Act, any involvement in pangolin scale or pangolin product trade is a non-bailable of which can get you minimum of 3-year punishment and maximum is 7 years, if I am not mistaken. And it is a serious offense in India. So let me tell you, if anybody is caught with pangolin scales, they are in trouble with a non-bailable offense. So that's it. The pangolins are as protected as tigers, elephants, and rhinos in India. Also, I looked at some of other questions which I wanted to answer also earlier. What is the scale used for? Now, that is probably a very interesting question. Ofir, nobody exactly knows. I mean, there are various theories which are floating across the world that pangolin scale is used for. I heard theories like, people were telling initial theory was that pangolin scales are used as a agent in the preparation of some of the drugs. So that went on for some time. Media took it and media said that pangolin scales are used in drugs. Then somebody told that, pangolin scales are used. Pangolin. Sorry, Ofir. I mean, I'll my part. Then we can collaborate. And then somebody told that pangolin scales are used to make bulletproof vests because they have that capacity of they have the features of Kevlar. So that was that. Then somebody came and told that pangolin scales are like rhino horn because it is keratin, so it is a substitute for rhino horn trade. Then somebody came up with another theory saying that pangolins are used for some China. So if anybody asks me, I really don't have a final answer what exactly is pangolin scales are used for. Only thing we know that there is a demand for pangolin scales and it is reaching, because unlike many other products, for ivory we know that they are getting carved at the end of the day, and artifacts are coming out of ivory. Animal skins are used as rugs or display articles. But now my question as a co-panelist offer to you, what do you think pangolin scales are actually used for? So I dodged the question and I put it in front of you.
No, look, I would love to, because okay, the real demand that we have is for the what is called traditional medicine market in Southeast Asia, mainly China and Vietnam. Okay, now I'm saying so-called because you remember I gave you the example of the Ivory Coast case. And in the Ivory Coast case, they were experimenting in boiling leopards, the same syndicate, experimented in boiling leopard bones, getting the gelatin out, it hardens, and then they sell it. Something that exists for tigers all along, called tiger cake, but never existed to this point at all from leopards. And in their Viber conversations, they actually tried to discuss this market. The big mafia boss in Vietnam and the representative in Africa are trying to evaluate whether this can be a far bigger market. So my take on a lot of what is called traditional medicine is that it's not traditional at all, in the sense that it keeps on getting new things. Okay. So there's nothing traditional about something that is newly arriving. As example, the leopard cake. Let's put it this way. But pangolin scales is not that. Okay. My wife has studied Chinese medicine. Okay, acupuncture and Chinese medicine. So helping her study for the exams, I can tell you that pangolin scales have always been a part of Chinese medicine, even back in the days. Okay, so it is a part of Chinese medicine for hundreds of years already. But obviously the marketing of it is a different thing. And the reality is that you have in Vietnam and in China many kind of sort of pharmacies, and most people wouldn't go to a doctor with some of the problems they have. They would go directly to that kind of pharmacy. It's a business, like all businesses, and they will prescribe to them anything, whether it is pangolin scale or some kind of powder or whatever that may be. And the scales were aggressively, from that time, marketed within those networks of things. And I could tell you that, sorry, I don't have the photo right now to show you, but there are photos I got from Vietnam where those scales are sold one by one. And one in that example with a price tag in front of it was of $1,000. So I'm guessing that is a very extreme kind of thing, but you can imagine what it means. You saw the quantities. So now realize that they are sold by a single one. You buy one, you're supposed to grind it, make tea with it, whatever. But it is a real item in the old traditional medicine of Chinese medicine. In Vietnam, it is huge.
Yeah, that's nice information of it, and you must have know more about the traditional Chinese medicine than you read the papers and all. I guess you helped your wife to prepare for the exam.
Ofir, I mean, that will be a lot of interesting household discussion, that what pangolin scales are used for, or rhino horn is used for. I can imagine you discussing that in the kitchen and the dining table. I mean, knowing you. Okay, but that's interesting. That's interesting, Ofir, because people who are selling things, of course, we know that there is a market, but the end use, what exactly it is used for. So various theories were floating around, of course. But again, Ofir, the question is that such large quantity, who is consuming and what number, what large quantity they are consuming? Like you are getting tons of pangolin scales to consume in this market. So that's really, worrying, and that is really matter of concern. And any base to the other theories, whether it is used as part of some special drugs, or this creating this bone gelatins of animals, or as an additional ingredient, anything like that which you came across with?
I didn't come across it, and again, we are not the ones. We're the ones exporting. So all I know is from especially Vietnamese that are active on this illegal trade. Some in China as well. But it doesn't rule out a lot of other things. In the end of the day, it's a product like every product. I'm trying to explain that when we talk about demand supply, the world doesn't work in demand supply. This is a simplification of world economy. Nothing works in that way. I'm trying to explain that, when I bought my phone, I didn't have a demand for my phone, right? I had no idea I needed that iPhone specifically. I had no idea it was created. When they created it, they created a demand for it. It's a multinational. They deal with the supply and they propagate the demand. And so that's how normal economy works. And that's how the illegal trade works as well. It's not demand supply. It's an industry, a booming industry that makes a lot of money and reinvests it both in supply and propagating the demand. And I think that we've seen that with many other examples. Pangolin scale is a bit different, as I explained, because it's one of the only ones I actually saw that was indeed the demand was existing even in the back days. But for many others, we are looking at really inventing new uses, aggressively kind of like distributing them, propagating that demand, building up demand for things that were no demand for at all in the past. So yeah, I agree with you. It could be anything, because the minds of these criminals is how to propagate the demand and create new demands. It's like any other product out there, any other company that thinks of how to expand markets. So it's just how business works.
Cool. Other questions, Manish? Let's go to other questions.
Yeah, so there's a question for you, Joseph. It's a secret question. What is the estimated population being recorded in India of pangolins?
Unfortunately, very simple answer. Nobody knows. I mean, if anybody tell you that the pangolin numbers are 40,218, I will say that they're lying, because no studies done across the country to count pangolins. I mean, there are some isolated studies done to find the population. It's an estimation, but we don't know the exact numbers. So as we don't know the exact numbers, we don't know the exact damage which is caused, the exact number of animals which are lost. But I would like to tell you that, from an enforcement point of view, simple, that people who used to hunt pangolins earlier, they tell that when 10 years back, when they used to go for a hunt, they used to get 10 pangolins or 5 pangolins in a day. And now, if you go for 5 days, they get 1 pangolin. So that is the simple math says that, or shows that the number of animals have reduced in certain areas. And also, please understand, pangolins are not found only in forests, but also they're found in a lot in farmlands and scrub jungles and areas which are not protected. So many areas we don't know the population, but the numbers have come down largely in many areas. We don't know the
That's a
exact damage.
pangolin
Yeah.
population is a real mystery.
Yeah.
So we don't know actually how many we have. Then also there's a question for you only, Joseph. What's the Indian government? What step Indian government is taking? What measures Indian government is taking to stop illegal wildlife trade?
See, I would like to tell everyone that India has one of the most powerful laws in the country to protect its wildlife. It's very clear. Unlike many other countries where they have got provisions for hunting, and all, in India there is no hunting, there is no consumption, there is no bushmeat market, there is no legal trade, there is no quotas, nothing. If an animal is protected in India under the Wildlife Protection Act, it enjoys absolute protection. So the answer to that is, the government is doing a lot. We have dedicated National Wildlife Crime Control Bureau to start with. They have conducted various operations across the country to counter the illegal wildlife trade, especially looking at. They have done operations. State forest departments have done operation, and police and other agencies also done operations. And border, our border policies have seized the pangolin scales from customs, or SSP or Assam Rifles seized the pangolin scales from traffickers who are crossing material from India to other country. So the government is doing what it is supposed to do. The machinery is active. I will not say that the machinery is blind towards the problem. The government agencies are very much aware about the problem, and they are countering it effectively and efficiently. But of course, like any other criminal activities, there are gaps. So if you capture them in one point, the suspects and the criminals will move to another area. They will find another network, another method of doing trade. So that game will always continue. So I'll say that the enforcement agencies are pretty active, pretty aware about pangolin trade and working on it.
Thanks, Jose. Okay, there's an interesting question I would like to ask you. Have you ever encountered traffickers has reshaped or changed the shape of pangolin scale or trying to trade it as a powder or something?
No. Let me pick up a few more things that I can see here in the questions, and I'll try to make a more informed comment on this one. First is that no, we did not see any modified thing. Okay, you could see the quantities, and you can try to imagine how it will be to try to cut, for example, each one in half. It's just incredible to try to do that. So we never seen that. We've seen packing, but not changing the shape of it. I've seen here a question about, did we see any other things about other parts of the pangolins being traded? No, no nails, no snot, for example. There could be other things that could be traded. We don't see them at all in the illegal trade associated with that. There was a question about what is being done with the pangolins. So scales, we're pushing for it to be burnt. Okay, so it's not going to be recycled again through corruption in the trade like we have with ivory, with many other things through corruption. It just goes back to the trade by corrupt officials. So we try to get them burnt, and there are many huge quantities that were burnt already. Live pangolins, we have already some sanctuaries in Africa specialized in pangolins, because it takes time to recover the pangolins, to put them back in shape, and then try to reintroduce them back, try to check that. It's not an easy task at all. You know, as Jose was mentioning, it's not something that is just obvious, just like give it food and everything will be okay. So that's it. I think there was another a question about the publicizing the value of these things. I completely agree. This forum is a controlled forum, professional one. So I mentioned that for what's happening in Africa. We do not mention that at any point of time in the media, although we push a lot of things into the media. We never give the value of things exactly for that reason. It can attract traffickers in. So yeah, I was trying just to group a few things to try to make a snappy thing that will try to satisfy some of the people who were asking.
Yes, that's good answer, Ophir. And also, I haven't seen any media report or something saying that people are trying to sell pangolin scales powder or something. So Joseph, there's one simple question for you. It says like, to Central India has pangolin population like Bihar, Jharkhand, UP, and Chhattisgarh. I think you can answer
Yes,
very well. Yeah.
yeah. Central India do have a good population of pangolin. It's widespread population in all the states which the person named.
Yeah,
Do
and
pangolin scales regrow? Yeah, sorry, Manish.
yes, and we have encountered that as per our Wildlife Trust of India's enforcement assistance record, Central India has the most of the seizures record from recent years. So I think most of the capturing, hunting is happening in the Central India.
I'll just tweak it a little, saying that most of the non-hunting. So there could
Yeah.
be another areas where we don't know about what is happening, especially places like Rajasthan, Haryana, Punjab. There could be a good population of pangolins, but there is not much of a seizures happening in that area, which which probably is because the lack of enforcement. Detection is definitely it is a good indication that there is trade. I mean, there is a population locally, but lack of detection also which we cannot rule out. But traditionally, in with the hunting communities, pangolins are found in very good numbers in parts of Haryana and Punjab also. Yeah. Does pangolin scales regrow? Well, that's an interesting question. It is technically it is a modified hair, so it is supposed to regrow. I really don't have an answer, Adrish. Shrestha, to that question. But if you have any biologists sitting here who studied pangolins, can they answer? Because this is an opportunity for us also to learn. Ofir, you have any idea whether if you take one pangolin scale out, will it regrow?
No, but like, I'll explain
technically
how
it regrow.
I'll explain how it is not so relevant for illegal trade, because I see where this is going. The idea is that okay, I sometimes I'm asked the same question from people who don't really understand the illegal wildlife, the illegal ivory trade, and say, okay, well, why don't I just cut some of the tusk and it will get again get up? Yeah, it's true, it can be, but that's not how it works. You need to kill an elephant in order to take the tusk. You don't just say, hey, nice elephant, can I just cut a piece of your tusk? Okay, so the nature of the trade is that even if the tusk itself is growing, it doesn't help any of us because it's not a viable thing. When getting the pangolin scales is not an act of removing scales from the animal. It is an act of skinning the animal. The first thing you get when you skin an animal is an entire skin. Then when it dries, it will all fall into pieces. So you need to understand that it's not an act of like plucking one. Therefore, we can do some kind of a farming where let's take one by one by one by one. It doesn't work in that way. Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. Ofir and Manish, I have Aditya Joshi here in the group who actually answered this question. Aditya is an old friend, and Aditya, are you there? Can you put on this camera and come online? Because once I see your face, then I would like invite you. Because Aditya is somebody who done radio telemetry on pangolins and worked in central India. So probably he is one person who can tell us a little bit about the secret lives and what is his. Yeah, I would love to hear from you, Aditya. I mean, Manish, are we on track on time?
Yes, we are on track. We still 12 minutes. So we can hear from
Aditya, if you are there, I would like to hear from you.
Aditya is here.
I think he is not able to. Fine. If he's coming online, that's fine. Otherwise, because it's not definitely not. We never asked him earlier to talk about it, but Aditya I know his work. He done radio telemetry on rescued pangolins, and he will have some insight. But maybe probably another day we can invite him for a talk on his experiments with or his experience tracking released pangolin. Ofir, he will be he's a wonderful field biologist who has done excellent work in the field. So that's it. And then there is another question from the Vedapriya to everyone. We have a good team of forest department active in the most of the RF. How would the trafficking in the forest and keep on going trafficking? Well, Vedapriya, my answer is that most of our Indian cities do have a good policing system. We have DCPs, we have SIs and SHOs, but still robberies and murders happen. So a criminal who would have to commit this act of crime will always find a way to do it. Aditya, you came online. I saw you for a brief moment. Please, Aditya, give us 5 minutes. Talk about your experience monitoring rescued pangolins released in the wild. If you are still there, you can take over a moment.
Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, Aditya came online. Yeah, Aditya, over to you.
Yeah. Aditya, you are on mute. Can you?
Aditya, you're muted.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. So as
perfect,
rightly said, that rehabilitation of the pangolins is a big thing. Like it takes a lot of time, and most of the people don't know what to do with the live animals that are caught. So one small thing in collaboration with Madhya Pradesh Forest Department is what we are doing is the live animals which are seized, they are medically treated if needed, and using radio telemetry, we are following them and finding suitable release sites for the pangolins to be released in the wild, because the release site is one of the major things which determines whether the pangolins will survive in the wild or not. And we have collected data from wild pangolins, which were radio tagged. And we found out in a certain area what are the things that are needed for the pangolins to select a burrow, because they have feeding burrows, they have resting burrows, and we focus on resting burrows, and we look at presence of termites, on surface the ants that are there, and based on that we select the release site. And post release monitoring is the key thing which determines whether the pangolins will be able to survive in the wild or not. And we are using detection dogs to map presence of already wild pangolins in the area, because you can see burrows, but it's very difficult to tell whether the burrow is active or not. So you can put camera traps, but it's a very labor intensive work. So we have trained detection dogs, which can just indicate whether there is pangolin smell on the burrow or not. So if the smell is there, then we don't choose that site because there is a resident pangolin over there. And based on that, we select the release sites for the live animals which are seized. So that's in short what we are doing.
Thank you, Aditya, for that insight. Because suddenly, when I saw your name, and I I suddenly remembered you do this work, and very happy to see you after a long time. I mean,
yes,
I remember working together. So that's Aditya, who's done. He's humble. He's spoken very little about his work, but it is probably pioneering work in India about rehabilitation and understanding pangolins released in the wild, and what to do with rescued pangolins. Which I think, Aditya, I hope you guys are coming up with some guidelines.
Yes. So there is one, whatever that we have learned. Yeah. Whatever we have learned, there is a guideline from Central Zoo Authority, which documents stuff. But yeah, as you said, we really don't know much about the pangolins. We are also learning, and yeah, so we'll keep updating the guidelines. So
thank you, Aditya. And any other questions?
So there's one interesting question for Ofir and you also. And what is the most used method to transport illegal wildlife trade? Is it by air, train, bus? What method do you have encountered most?
Ofir, you answer first.
Okay, everything. Okay, so we had definitely when we talk about shipping containers that I gave you these examples that you've seen, this is through sea. Okay, when we talk about some of the things I said, they are repacking it as a food product. That was in some of the crates, some of the boxes, the cardboard boxes you've seen. This is for air. And within Africa, I gave you the example. I said, okay, even in the first year, we got a Chinese arrested through the sea coming from Nigeria. That's just a small boat, okay? But definitely through trains and public vehicles and normal vehicles. So in short, everything. That's our answer.
That's my answer too. Any method we can transport the material, conceal and transport the material from one place to another place. It depends on the terrain, it depends on the community, it depends on the availability of mode of transportation, whether you are within the country, whether you're transporting between cities, whether you are transporting across the border. It is up to the trafficker to find the most suitable method. I even came across with the floaters, like people put things in a completely sealed container and put it in the river so that it can be collected the downstream. It is used in one part of the country. Yes. In the river. So it's up to the creativity. It's up to the creativity of the smuggler to smuggle things. So that makes it very, very difficult for enforcement agencies to pick up things, because if you study, people will look at most common things which are traded between international borders. Because if you look at Indian borders like Northeast, there is a lot of vegetables which are transported across the border. So people hide it in the vegetable bags. In the Indo-Nepal border long back, they were using sugarcane trucks, because there was a sugarcane trafficking between India and Nepal because of the factory. So you put some stuff in a sugarcane truck, it will be next to impossible to detect. The trafficking methods are really diverse, and the detection will become very difficult for people, enforcement agents. And they have to use x-rays, they have to use sniffer dogs, they have to use manual checking, they have to use profiling of passengers, everything. To if it is a controlled transportation port like an airport or a seaport, but places like road crossings across friendly neighboring countries, it will be very difficult to find, because it will be impossible. Humanly, it will be impossible to check every truck, every hiding place for illegal wildlife products or anything else. So I think we broadly answered that question. Any other question? I think we are at the
Yeah,
end of
yes.
the time limit.
Yes, so sir, and we are just about to wrap up the session. And anybody who has it was a interesting webinar where we got so many questions. If you have more question, you can write back to us on the email ID which I posted on the chat box. So we will try to connect with Ophir and the concerned people, and we'll definitely write you back with the correct answer. And thanks a lot, Ophir, for joining us. Thanks a lot, Joseph, for joining us. And we got a great participation here. And yeah, there's a lot to know more about this species, which is the highly most trafficked mammal, but still there's less studied, less known, population is unknown, how they behave in the wild is unknown. So there's a lot to talk about the species. So we'll be arranging again the few webinars with the other people to talk about their population, biological aspects, and all. So thanks a lot for joining.